Apple just did something that they have avoided for years. They have just packaged up a whole bunch of their Creative Pro apps and productivity apps in a subscription called Apple Creator Studio. It's filled with quite a lot of apps that previously were primarily seen as one-time purchases, tools that professionals owned. And so it isn't surprising to see creators react hesitantly to this change. So for today's video, whether you are a student just starting out with creative tools or a professional creative who relies on these tools every single day, I want to explore whether Apple Creator Studio is incredible value or just a really bad deal. I guess the first question we ought to ask ourselves is, what is Apple Creator Studio? Well, essentially, it is a suite of existing creativity and productivity apps that Apple are bundling together, adding some new features to it, and packaging up as a subscription that people can pay for on a monthly or annual basis. I'd love to give you a really quick overview of some of these apps that are part of this bundle. So firstly, we have 4 productivity apps that are currently all free and come pre-installed on a Mac or an iPad when you buy them. The first one is Pages. Pages is essentially Apple's word processing software. The closest equivalent is probably Microsoft Word, and I've used this over the last 10 years for so much of my university work and my professional work, whether it's writing up an essay, writing up an article, formatting a report, all while making your documents look professional in the process. What's really cool about Pages is if you want to take that creativity to another level, it also has this mode called Page Layout Mode, where you can go in and shift the optimization of the UI from word processing to more of a page layout design mode. Probably the closest app to this in terms of function is Adobe InDesign, where people design magazines, booklets, page layouts. And if you're really into that sort of stuff, Pages has the capability to be a design app. And over the last few years, particularly in work, I've designed so many professional PDF documents and printed documents using this mode in Pages. Next, we have Keynote, which is essentially Apple's presentation software, and I have used it as well for the last 10 years, both as a student and professionally, to create really compelling and visually stunning slide decks. It is so intuitive to use and really easy to make things look good. And that's kind of the main feature that made me switch from PowerPoint to Keynote initially. And similar to Pages, I love using Keynote as a design app. Basically, a design app for anything that isn't a multi-page document. So maybe I'm designing a logo, maybe I'm designing a poster, making some bookmarks, handouts, representing ideas. Keynote is without a doubt my favorite app on the MacBook. I made an entire video on it, so check that out if you haven't already. And I just think it is so much more than just a presentation app. Once you learn that you can change the aspect ratio and size of your slide, this is a tool that I use for so many things, from social media carousels, Instagram stories, thumbnails for my videos, or even just a card that I'm making someone. Next, we have Numbers. Numbers is Apple's version of a spreadsheet software akin to Microsoft Excel. I got to admit, of all the productivity apps, this is probably the one I use the least, simply because I have had to use Excel quite a bit at university in science and processing data. At work, all my colleagues are using Excel to like timetable things, and finally when it comes to taxes, it just tends to be standard procedure. So I don't use Numbers as much, but one of the things that is nice is it's very easy to move assets between Numbers, Pages, and Keynotes. Finally, we've got Freeform, which is actually a relatively new app that's been added in the last couple of years. It's essentially a digital whiteboard app with an infinite canvas that people can use to brainstorm ideas, plan, map out ideas, etc. Interestingly, I actually don't use this feature as much because I tend to gravitate towards GoodNotes on my iPad because it recently added a new whiteboard file format. And I really enjoy the experience of using that. So those are the 4 main productivity apps. As I said earlier, they are free and they tend to be the equivalent of the Microsoft Office suite. Moving on to the next category, the creative apps. I think the key difference between the creative apps and the productivity apps are the productivity apps tend to be the ones that you find in a general office that a lot of people use. The creative apps are more specialized and are more tailored for the creative professions, and all of them come at a particular cost. The first app is Final Cut Pro, which comes in at $300 or 500 Australian dollars. This is the app that I've used since 2017 for video editing. It's fast, it's efficient. I use it daily, whether it's for YouTube, whether it's for creative work or professional video work that I am doing for clients. For me, it strikes that balance of being professional with functionality for what I need it to be, and also super fast and snappy when it comes to my workflow. Now, to go with Final Cut Pro, we have two other softwares, Motion and Compressor. Motion is a tool that allows you to design animations and titles. Once again, I actually use Keynote for that, surprisingly, so I tend not to use Motion. And Compressor is a tool that I think some people use to export files from Final Cut Pro to YouTube or to broadcast, etc. I tend not to use it. My videos tend to be quite short. But both of these apps are specialized. They usually come in at $49 each or 79 Australian dollars each. And because of that, I just simply haven't used it in the past, mainly because I haven't needed to. But now that's part of this subscription. We also have Pixelmator Pro, an app that comes in normally for $50 or 80 Australian dollars. This is an app that some people use as a photo editor, a design tool, perhaps even a Photoshop alternative, as I've heard. I'm not sure what I think about this app at the moment. I'm personally quite stuck in a Lightroom and Photoshop workflow when it comes to editing photos, but I've been playing around with it for a bit, and it kind of has this really interesting mix of being a designing app that has some of the Lightroom features, a lot of the Photoshop features, but also the intuitiveness of Keynote. So I'm relatively new to it, but I might play around with it over the next couple of months. And if it's everything I've heard it could be, who knows, I might make the transition from Photoshop all the way over to this. And then we have two more apps which are geared to audio or music production, which I don't use as much, but I sometimes use as a hobby. So there's Logic Pro, which comes in at $199 or 320 Australian dollars. It's Apple's full music production studio. You can record vocals, instruments, make beats, songs, music scores. I'm into music as a hobby, and so I enjoy sometimes sitting down, making a recording, plugging in my electronic keyboard, and playing around with the whole library of instruments that come built into Logic Pro. There's also another app called MainStage, which costs $30, 50 Australian dollars. This is a tool that is there to support people who perform music live. That's about all I know about it. It's good to know that feature is there for those who need it. So essentially what has happened as of the end of January, Apple has thrown these 10 apps together in a bundle called Apple Creator Studio, and they've given it a whole new rebranded look, feel, and aesthetic, as you can see on the screen. Some people on social media aren't really taking a liking to it, but I can kind of see what they're going for here. It gives off the industry standard vibe that the Adobe Creative Cloud suite has. A very minimalistic, clean aesthetic. How much does it cost? If you're interested in getting your hands on this whole suite of apps, Apple are now offering them at a deal in the United States at $12.99 per month, or $129 per year, with a month free trial. Or in Australia, $20 per month, or $200 per year. Now, what's really interesting, and I think this is super relevant because a lot of my viewers tend to fall in this category, there is a student/educator discount. So if you're studying right now or working at a university, you can get the suite of apps in the United States for $3 a month or $30 a year. Or if you're in Australia, $5 a month and $50 a year. Just one thing to keep in mind, if you get a regular subscription, you're able to use it on a family plan for up to like 6 people, but that does not apply for the educator discount. Now, just in case you're one of those people who are anti-subscription and are thinking, this is horrible news, I want to be able to own my software outright, don't you fear, you're still able to make an outright purchase of these apps as one-time purchases on the App Store. So with that in mind, if you're able to just get these apps outright and pick the ones that are relevant to you, it begs the question, why do I even need the Apple Creator Studio subscription in the first place? Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. The first one is I think it offers a level of access to the paid apps that you didn't have before at a more affordable price if you want to test them out or just use them for a short period of time. So for example, if I just went through all the paid creative apps right there and tallied up how much they would cost, that would come to $680 US to get access to all those apps. In Australia, that's 1,090 Australian dollars. You know, that is quite a bit of money to spend to just play around with these apps and get a sense of what they're doing. But the fact that you can now test them out for $12 for 1 month or $5 if you're a student, I think is super cool. In fact, let's just say just reduce it down to Final Cut Pro. If you're a student and you want to spend $300 just to use Final Cut Pro once on a project, that seems sort of unreasonable. But the fact that you can now spend $3 for 1 month, use Final Cut Pro for the project, and maybe you really love Final Cut Pro at the end of that process, and then you can either buy the app in full or continue on with that subscription. What I love about this is it's making these apps more accessible to people. Secondly, Apple Creator Studio offers some exclusive AI features and integration into some of the free apps. So for example, in Keynote, you can get it to generate some initial slides for you automatically based on text you might put in there. Maybe you've written a report, you can put that report text into Keynote and it'll generate a structured set of slides. It also gives you access to high quality photos. Maybe you're doing a presentation on plants one day, and now instead of having to go and take a picture of a plant or going to Google and taking someone else's image, it can generate an image for you that you can use on the spot. You also get access to premium templates that you can use. Once again, I've never really been a template guy, but I know a lot of people who love having more choice when it comes to templates. There's also an image generation tool. I'm sure people use other softwares for that too, but now it's inbuilt as well. And there's even a feature called Clean Up Your Slides, which is meant to provide some design assistance to make your slides look more aesthetically appealing. I'm interested to see how I go with this in the long term. I'm very picky around how I want my slides to look, and I like doing that by myself. But I'll probably do a more extensive review on that feature in the long term. And finally, I guess the third reason to dive into this subscription model that Apple's offering is maybe to get on board with the promise that they're implicitly making to customers here. So let me explain, because this kind of leads me on to my next point. Why does Apple Creator Studio even exist? You know, I love the productivity apps and creative apps that Apple has created. Final Cut Pro, Pages, Keynote, these apps are integral to my creative process. I use them as a student, I use them professionally, I use them on this YouTube channel. However, when I kind of look at the development of these apps over the last 10 years, let's take Final Cut Pro as an example. I've used that app for 9 years, and I can only think of 2 to 3 times where there have been updates that have included features that have felt genuinely useful, innovative, and game-changing for me. And you know what? The same could probably be said of Keynote and Pages. There have been some really cool incremental changes over the last couple of years, a lot of aesthetic changes in terms of the UI, etc. But when I look at the competitors, for example, such as Canva, which has a whole digital suite of softwares to make you slide decks, social media posts, videos, reels, etc., Canva is always innovating. Every couple of months, they have a new set of features, and most recently, they have some really cool AI features that are able to take a document of text and turn it into a whole suite of visual assets. Adobe is always trying out new AI features inside Lightroom and Photoshop and then recommending them to the users. I'm not saying everything that these brands are coming out with is good stuff. A lot of it needs refinement. A lot of it is sometimes a stab in the dark. But these guys are doing really cool things. And as a result, over time, through iteration, their apps are getting significantly better. And you know what? So rarely do I see Apple show the same level of innovation and care with their own apps. They're not incapable of doing it. They do it every year with the new iPhones. They do it every year with the new iPad. They're really good at releasing hardware. And every WWDC in the middle of the year, they're able to release a general software update across the board, which leads to general user experience improvements, speed, and some general AI features. But these individual apps tend to be neglected because they're one-time purchases. What it makes me think is in the shift to the subscription model, the promise that Apple is making is they're sort of saying we're on the hook now. We're committed to making these apps as good as they can be. And I think users now have the opportunity or responsibility to go and request from Apple for what they want these apps to be and what new features they want to see. I have so many requests of things I want to see in Keynote in terms of text effects. In Final Cut Pro, yes, they've made some new improvements. You know, as someone who likes to shoot a lot of interviews, sort of documentary style filmmaking, in Final Cut Pro, I would love to see a feature that takes a long interview, transcribes it all into text, and then as an editor, I can go through the text, highlight, delete bits of text. And as I'm working on the text, the video edits itself based on what I'm cutting out in the text. That is such a cool feature. It's something Final Cut Pro could do, but it requires a bit of attention from the developers to treat it like a serious product that deserves continual updates. And from my point of view, one of the things that gets me really excited about all these apps being bundled together is Apple are implicitly making a commitment that since people are going to be continually paying for it, that they're going to continue to make this as good as it can be, and people have a right to demand what they want from it. And so honestly, at the end of the day, I think this is a win-win scenario. If you want to do a one-time purchase of these apps, go ahead and continue to do that, and you'll get all the new updates. You just won't get some of those AI features in Pages and Keynote, etc. If you want to go and make those one-time purchases on those creative apps, you can still go and do it. If you want to use Pages, Keynote, and Numbers without the AI features, which aren't even essential in the first place, you can still use them because they're free. Or if you're someone who's just never used any of these apps before and you've got a project coming up and you want to play around with them for an assignment, I mean, you can use it for a couple months. Get your first month for free at the free trial, and then if you would like, you can pay a reasonable amount for the next couple of months. I think it's the best of both worlds because I think it is the change that they need in their strategy because they are nailing it when it comes to hardware. Like, I literally have a Mac and an iPad right now that aren't even using 30% of the power that's on it. Apple clearly does not have a hardware problem, but it has so much potential that's not tapped into in the software realm, and particularly in these apps, which is where most of us are spending our time, by the way. So yeah, guys, those are my initial thoughts and response to this new subscription model Apple's released. I'm actually really keen to hear from all of you what specific features you'd love to see Apple add in future software updates. So let me know down in the comment section below. If you have any questions about any of those apps in particular or anything that I've shown, please let me know down in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.